thank you all for coming. And I want you to all just think for about 2 seconds, because there's something that's going to happen. If my dad isn't right, and there is an afterlife, we are all in trouble, because this is not what he wanted. I mean, we will all be haunted, and I especially will be haunted. And everybody else for being culpable in it. So, what I want to do is do something much closer to what he wanted. And he's not into big tributes and things like that. He likes parties. So, in case anybody's forgotten, he was kind of the party king. I've tried to do what he does over in Australia, but it's just not the same here. So, first of all, I kind of need to get into costume. So, excuse me for 2 seconds.
She's putting on his elbow.
Woo!
Sexy!
At the time he had worm medicine around his mouth too.
Yeah, I should have a ring here. And in his later years, he donned the cap, which I'll put on for a few minutes, but it's not a good look on me, so I won't stay. Okay, so what? Whoa, was it off?
You need the gray hair now.
Can you hear me now? Okay, so I'm just going to go through a brief history of my dad and try to remember some of the highlights. He was born in 1923 in San Francisco. His father, John Homer Woolsey, was a doctor. His mother had been a nurse. He has an older sister, Jane. He was living in San Francisco on Plain, and he just, like, we always had to go, every time we went to San Francisco, Funston Street, Funston Avenue, the National Shrine, we all had to pay homage as we drove past. He would show us all these haunts in Golden Gate Park that he absolutely loved. And then the reality was jerked out from under him. And when the Depression was on, his dad moved over to the Woodland Hospital to help resurrect a failing hospital. And so my dad moved to the town of Woodland, where I think they bribed him and they gave him a horse or something. Anyway, so Lynn would know about that. Anyway, so he grew up there in Woodland, and Majel, who's someplace here, actually went right from primary school all the way through high school with him. And then Majel eventually married Rick, his partner, and they all moved over here. But in between, my dad barely survived high school. I don't know if you all know, but he has a record. He stole a crate of tomatoes, and I think he and his friend Bob threw tomatoes all over town on Halloween, and he was arrested. And the story I get is that his dad left him in jail all night to teach him a lesson. So despite that record, he eventually went on to university. He also had a short stint, well, actually not a short stint, but a small stint in the Feather River Boys Camp. And that's where he really grew to love horses. This is up in the kind of basin of Mount Lassen. And he just absolutely fell in love with horses up there. And he went to summer camp, and he eventually became a counselor. There's a few pictures of him on that slideshow. He ended up eventually going to, I think it was UC Berkeley to begin with. He might have transferred back to Davis. That part I kind of can't remember because I forgot my notes along with a lot of other things. And anyway, so he ended up getting drafted in the war, and he flew in the Army Air Corps. And he flew 35 missions over Germany out of England. Now, he got a few medals, and I don't think there's anything that, like, they're great, they're good medals. Someplace around here circulating is a nice, tall young man in an Australian Air Force suit. And that is my son, Duncan. And he gave Duncan all of his medals because Duncan is a Hornet pilot. And he and Duncan have a love of flying. And so there he is right there.
Yep.
And those are my dad's medals. And Duncan can actually wear those And next week he has to be back in Australia to march in the Anzac Parade in Sydney. And those medals will be marching up and down Sydney. So after the war, he came back to California, and his good friend Pete Kennedy was already over at Kansas State. And this is where kind of things like, it kind of really grates on me to hear this. I don't know if you know how my dad got into vet school, but he came back and he said, well, what the heck am I going to do? And he saw Pete Kennedy's mother, and Pete Kennedy's mother said, well, why don't you go to vet school? And he goes, well, it's already started. And so somehow they got a hold of Pete. Pete went to the dean. And then Pete said, and this is all on record, this is on the archives apparently of some videotape that they did of Pete Kennedy at Kansas State. Pete Kennedy said, I got this friend that wants to go to vet school. And they said, well, does he know a lot about animals? No. Well, is he a good student? And he goes, no. And the dean said, is he good looking? And Pete said, yeah, he's really good looking. He says, okay, tell him to come on. 7 rejections from veterinary school for me. That gets in on his good luck. Okay, so gets through vet school, goes to Davis, back to Davis, does an internship. He's over in at UC San Francisco, and at some point in there I'm born, and he actually got to be there when I was born, and I guess in those days men just didn't come into the room. But since he was working there, teaching doctors how to do surgery, because they were starting to learn how to do kidney transplants there, and veterinarians were better physical technicians on suturing and stuff, so he was over there helping with that. And he, this is a real quick story, but they went to a dinner to thank everybody, and there was a fellow there that was from the East Coast, and they had artichokes. And this guy kind of looked at my dad like, how the heck do you eat that? And my dad looked at him, and he was another veterinarian. And my dad took the whole leaf of the artichoke and ate it. What's one leaf? And then he set it down and started eating things. And this guy proceeded to gag down. Okay, here's the bad news. That fellow became my surgery professor at Auburn. And he didn't forget. Okay, so then eventually my dad wanted to move over to Santa Rosa or move someplace else. But while he was at Davis, he had a few surgical things come up, like a foal with a hernia and a foal with a meconium impaction. And because everybody was just getting out of school, there weren't any really taught surgeons there yet. I mean, everybody was kind of new and just kind of doing it. And my grandfather was over at the Woodland Clinic. So at night, they slipped these 2 foals over at different times, and they did surgery and my grandfather showed him how to do hernia repairs and how to do, fix these meconium impactions, and then they would bring them back to the vet school and recover them over there. So my dad had a lot of opportunities that other people